Alright, so I already made a video talking about Pike, where I think his ultimate, which has already been iterated on the PvE, and now like skill is a lot worse, and he can't execute people from his high, is going to be kind of silly, and it seems like forced, like his thematic of being like an assassin support, because he doesn't end up playing like a support at all, and it's really forced that he has to play like damage oriented, and he's just going to be like what Riven and Yasuo players end up playing when they get auto-filled into support and solo queues, so it'll be interesting. But I think he's like really forced design, which is if they wanted to do like a more assassin oriented support, maybe it could be a support that acts like an assassin but doesn't necessarily have to have the damage for it. It just acts that way to enable other people. But who knows? Him having like an execute but donating the gold and whatnot, that just seems kind of like really like he has to play like a supportive role in the team. Like we don't want him playing an aggressive role, even though that's the way like the champion would play. So forced, heavy-handed, you know. But it is what it is. Anivia. So Anivia, like let's see what the logic here is. 8.9 mana changes hit her harder than most mages, looking to bring some of her power back. So Anivia pre-changes had like a really high win rate, like 54% with like a decent play rate. So honestly, if she got toned back a bit, I'm pretty sure she's still like 51% or something. Like she's still in like a fine spot. So like buffs like this are, I don't know, probably unwarranted, but if they want to see the champion get played more or fiddled with more, or if she's supposed to be like super safe and reliable, then you know, that's cool. But I don't think she really needs this as like a buff. But this is a 0.1 AP ratio in total that she's going to gain, because 0.45 she can double tap it. She can get the pass-through damage and then pop it and get the damage for the explosion too. And then 2 seconds off the base cooldown. It doesn't even matter as you scale it down. So by level 13, this won't matter as much. Maybe a little bit later. Some people like putting a couple points into wall to cover off certain parts of the map more reliably. But by 13, it'll be the same. It's just a little. It makes her a little bit safer early, and potentially increases her wave clear like 1 through 5, where she has to rely on Flash Frost to be able to clear. So Graves, the best jungler in the game, him and Xin Zhao basically for solo queue. Graves is like the more reliable of the two, though. New emphasis on early jungle scrapping is pretty much Graves' happy place. It's left other champions 6 feet under. Ooh. Dialing back his early dueling, putting longer when on his full combo. So he has 3 less AD. That won't hurt him a ton. He's still going to be 100% health the entire time he jungles. He's still going to out-stat check basically every jungler that's short range that has to come into him, because he just does so much more damage with auto attacks than they do. And his Q also just does more damage than like anybody else's spells, because it does like the double hit, which if you're in the jungle, you're going to get hit by the double hit almost guaranteed. And then putting back some of the cooldown they just took off of his ultimate. Don't think whoops. Don't think this is enough of a nerf. I think Graves will still be very potent and still be really hard to deal with, especially with how easily he like controls Scuttle and how well he scales into the game in the present. And just with how reliable he's always been in the jungle. Something that I've always wanted them to target is like most junglers have an issue where like you have to be able to clear the jungle at a certain like health or at a certain speed to be able to like be competitive. Well, Graves kind of like automatically clears very fast and never drops below like 80% health in the jungle. It's just not a thing because of his constant knockback on every auto attack. So there's no way that Graves can ever be like vulnerable early, and him being slightly vulnerable early, if he's going to scale into being like a better threat later to mid to late game than most champions do, I think that could actually be like a meaningful like trade-off. Not that he shouldn't have it. I mean, like if the thematic is, well, he has a shotgun, so of course he's gonna knock back the raptors and stuff that he blasts. Like the thematic is alright, but maybe they get, if he's been knocked them back a certain number of times, then they get like resistance to his knockback, so that he'll actually take some meaningful damage in the jungle, or I don't know, because he always ends up interacting with other junglers, and he has like both of his pots up, and you don't have a pot, and he's still higher health than you are, so it becomes really hard to contest him early. And if you're a melee champion, you just get stat checked trying to fight him. So, all right, Kha'zix. One thing, every assassin needs a way to dance in and out of a fight, safely put down damage. For Kha'zix, it's stealth. The brush from Brush stealth from evolved R is giving too much of a different strength, the ability to sneak around the map undetected, removing the evolution bonus. Alright, so this is what his old R used to do, where it gives you 3 casts instead of 2 and increase the duration. This was only broken the one time where it gave damage reduction instead of giving the invisibility that it gives now. A change I would like to see instead is, instead of it giving invisibility, it gives stealth. I don't know why this says it gives stealth, because it gives invisibility where you couldn't even see it with pink words. I think the counterplay should be that you use a pink word to track Kha'zix as he moves around the map. Instead, these are just really big nerfs to like the way Kha'zix plays at the moment. I mean, you can still play Q Evolve Kha'zix. It has really good dragon control and really good in-jungle skirmishing, but ultimately I can't see like much merit to it, because he's not going to get around the map very quickly. He gets kind of low in his first clears in the jungle. He doesn't clear particularly fast, so it'll be harder for Kha'zix to snowball, and if it's harder for him to snowball, he's not going to be very reliable, and if he's not very reliable, he'll stop being like a competitive pick, and he will lose a lot of his utility where he can scout places relatively safely. So this is going to force Kha'zix probably back into evolving Q, because they buffed the Q evolve not that long ago, I believe. Or, yeah, they buffed the damage of his Q when people are isolated substantially. So people will probably go back to Q evolve, and if people are going back to Q evolve, then they're probably going to be looking for like aggressive jungle invades, but those will be a lot less safe because it's going to be you can track him the entire time, and this just makes his ganking like overall like pretty poor like it used to be. So Kha'zix will probably go back to being, he'll still be popular. Kha'zix has always been popular, but he's going to be a lot less reliable. I'm going to go over patch notes first, and then maybe battle right after or something. But I'm definitely going over all of this first. So, Kindred. Mark of the Kindred, 40-second respawn time. First mark spawns at 2:05 instead of 2:20. So, this means that one of the first 2 scuttles will get marked. And if it gets marked earlier, that means that she can kind of react during her second camp without having to wait around. Or even potentially after like, no, that would never come up, because the first camp you'd still have like 10 seconds, so like minimum like 5 seconds like to do if you're like soloing it. So this makes it a little bit easier for her to base her decision for where she wants to go for like a third camp. And then this just means that she can have more opportunities to contest marks, but Kindred has a really hard time contesting marks, not because of a respawn time, but because she's not very powerful in the fights that she gets into early. So she can kite some of the melees. She can't kite somebody like Xin Zhao, who sticks to her too reliably. She can't fight somebody like Graves, because he has also range. She can't fight basically anything that can get onto her early. She can't fight Kha'zix. She can't fight Skarner if he can close the gap once, because he stuns her and then keeps her. Then he can stay close to her with his speed. So she has a really hard time fighting over the marks independent. I mean, I guess if there's more attempts, then like she can probably get a couple more over the course of a game. But I just really think they need to rework the fact that so much of her power is gated behind these marks that, like, depending on what side of the map is strong, or depending on just like purely like matchup based stuff between lanes and between her and enemy jungler, and also just like how much of a risk it is for her to go contest it. So much of her power shouldn't be gated behind something that has randomness to it. So LeBlanc, she can queue up her spells. Cool. Alright, Lee Sin now gets more energy back from hitting things. Timer displays an icon showing second cast ability. Cooldown reduction now also. Okay, so this means that the cooldown reduction will apply. So when you throw the first Q, your cooldown will immediately start ticking. Previously, the cooldown wouldn't start ticking until you used both activations. So now you can use one activation, the cooldown will start ticking. So in most cases, this means you're going to get about 1 second to 2 seconds off of your spell that you would use if you were weaving in the auto attacks early anyway. So this is actually a pretty large buff to Lee, because he'll have 1 second to 2 seconds off of all of his cooldowns at basically all stages for cooldown reduction anyway. So it's not going to be like early, but it means that cooldown reduction will be working during that. So I guess it was, since they're only stating cooldown reduction, not just like the cooldown tick, so I assumed it was ticking before, but like the cooldown reduction wasn't applying during that period. So this could save him like 1 second or 2 later in the game. Early game, if this only applies to the cooldown reduction, won't matter. You don't have cooldown reduction at the start of the game. But if it just generally, like if it didn't tick down at all before, then this is actually a huge buff. But I assume this is a smaller buff because the wording makes it seem that way. All right, Rakan, seen as the best support in the game at the moment and has the most reliable hard engage to fucking ever do it. So they are nerfing his heal. One sec, turn the air conditioner on. They are nerfing his heal to make him a little bit less survivable in lane, to make him a little bit easier to punish. And if he's a little bit easier to punish in lane, maybe he'll have less opportunities to go in. Ultimately, 4 off the heal early isn't super substantial. It'll probably be more felt in the later levels. He looks like it's scaling down a little bit more aggressively as he ramps up. And 40 off of his shield. This is actually double this because he can use his shield twice. So instead of like this would have been 100, 150, 200, up to 300. So it would have been 100 to 300. Now it's 80 to 280 basically because he's losing 10 at all ranks. So 80 from 100 is actually fairly substantial because you're losing 100 shield in a early trade. Not 100 shield, you're losing 20 shield in an early trade. But 20 shield can be as much as like half of an auto attack early. So this is the more substantial of the 2 nerfs probably. But this is just a little something. I mean, coupled with like the regen changes they're doing to like bot lane, like this might make it so you can aggress upon a Rakan lane a little bit safer. So we'll see. Alright, Talia. Alright. Let's see what went through. Toward Bay here. My baby. Talia has a lot of strengths that are great in pro play and just okay elsewhere. A lot of that comes from Q's wave clear, so the bulk of our mechanical changes focus on that ability. Talia will have to work harder to shove a wave in roam so that her opposing laner has more room to punish those roams. We're also looking to decreasing the terrain control she brings from her ultimate, as it's bringing too much utility beyond just its roam strength. So they are buffing her movement speed. 15 movement speed is actually pretty substantial. And 30 health. This is the 30 health that she lost a couple patches ago, which they wanted to make her more vulnerable by doing. So maximum move speed is up on this. Combat lockout is down, so when she gets a wave push, she can get going faster to get to other places. So that would be a great change. The issue comes with this. This is the biggest part right here. No longer does area of effect damage, so you can W the wave together, either backwards or forward, and then you can hit most of the creep wave, if not all of it, with each hit of Q, and clear the creep wave with one full combo of spells. So after the changes, you are never going to be able to clear the full creep wave with one combo of spells unless you maxed E or something, which with how much damage that Q provides you for trading and the nerf to E down here, you're probably not going to be maxing E. You're still going to be maxing Q. So if you're maxing Q, you're not going to be able to wave clear as reliably. You don't get movement speed when you're on wet ground anymore either. This will be a little bit offset by the 15 here. I think you're still going to end up a little bit negative for movement speed when you're in combat now, because before it would be you'd start a Q and you would gain a little bit of movement speed, so even if you were just out of range, you could normally chase them down to get that little bit of extra, so you could get that one tick, because you would run faster than they would. You're not going to be able to do that anymore, because you are not going to gain a burst of movement speed when you cast your Q anymore. So this is something that will offset it a little bit. Minions no longer take reduced damage from additional rocks, so killing a cannon minion will be easier for Talia, and if she can hit all of her rocks on different minions, then she can still attempt to wave clear. It'll just be really hard for her, because melees are probably going to take multiple hits of rocks, and then if melees are taking multiple hits, then there's no way that you can hit the entire wave in one rotation of spells, so it's always going to take 2 rotations of spells to be able to clear the wave. So if it always takes 2 rotations of spells, then that means it'll take early game an extra 9 seconds to clear, later game it'll take an extra like 3 seconds to clear, and that extra 5 or 3 seconds like outweighs like the movement speed that she gets here. So, and it also means that she has to move up a little bit more aggressively to be able to push, because she wants to be constantly moving to get like hits on like every individual minion. So she's going to have to play more aggressively in the lanes, which opens her up to more windows to being punished. And she's going to be in the lane longer, which gives other champions that are already beat the shit out of Talia more windows to bully her, because Talia is not good at fighting enemy champions. Talia wants to shove and not interact with the enemy laner, because Talia doesn't have high damage on her spells, because her combo is relatively low damage, her ultimate doesn't do any damage, and her combo is unreliable. You should not be landing WEs on somebody raw unless they are misplaying, basically. Not without some kind of other setup first. So, since her damage and her ability to protect herself is relatively unreliable, if she's in the lane for twice as long as she would be before to deal with every creep wave, then she becomes much more punishable in the lane. Even if like her W cooldown's down, you're still only going to use one of these per wave. I mean, she still has like very high mana costs on her Q. None of that was reverted. She still has very high mana cost on her E. So, and her E's damage, the initial and explosion, is down early. So what I was thinking initially when they posed these changes on the PvE was that maybe you would put earlier points into E so that you could WE the wave and potentially be able to clear it more reliably that way, so that you could still take advantage of the fact that she's going to move around the map really quickly, especially with this new combat lockout and a little bit of movement speed and the base movement speed buff here. But since they also lowered the E damage at low ranks pretty aggressively, 20 damage at low ranks, like this is actually can be 40 damage too, because on a creep wave this would be 40 because it will go off both hits. That's the initial and the when it goes away. So it's 40 damage early. In addition to the Q changes, she's going to struggle a lot more to push in an early wave, and how much she's going to struggle to push in an early wave should hinder her way more than like the small buffs that she's getting to compensate. She's not going to be much better at fighting enemy champions because you're only going to get one combo off feasibly anyway, and then the combo will potentially do less damage because the initial explosion of this is less. So she'll be a little bit faster, which is nice. A little bit of health to offset. This is the best change, I think, because you don't have to be 5 seconds out of combat to be able to move around the map quickly. 2 seconds is a lot easier to find opportunities to start moving with, but definitely seems like decent sized nerfs overall. She's going to have a lot harder time getting around the map. And then lowering the duration on this makes her a little bit less reliable at securing side objectives like turrets, like Baron, like Dragon, Elder Dragon later in the game, to make sure that like it's hard for them to contest. It being 5 seconds baseline is just a nerf to her utility. I mean, she can still roam with it, right? So this is just strictly like a nerf to like her utility and her ability to like play a macro oriented game, which is like why I've always enjoyed playing Talia, because she can force around like certain objectives, but she's gonna have like a harder time moving around, and then her ultimate's not as good as doing it, and then she even like loses some like damage early. So definitely seems notably worse overall. We'll see how it turns out. This revert plus the fact that minions don't take reduced damage from single things, and these could mean that she's okay. She might not get substantially worse in solo queue, but I would say that she'll be much worse at what she wants to do. These hurt her play pattern in particular, because she wants to be moving around the map and enabled to do that, and she's going to have a really hard time moving around the map if she has a much harder time clearing waves. And that opens her up to a lot more windows for people to punish her. So I have a strong opinion on like these changes, that they kind of like remove like her identity as a champion. They don't literally remove her identity, but they make her play pattern and her identity a lot harder to achieve. So don't like the direction of the changes. Alright, Urgot. We're making Urgot more fluid to play and stripping some of the anti-jungling tuning from his kit. So his collision radius is now smaller, and his base attack speed is bigger, so he's not going to get like stuck on creeps as often, I guess, is the play there. So his shotgun legs do 35 more damage early to jungle monsters. I think they also do percentage max health. So if this is enough damage, then Urgot has a pretty good kit for jungling, because he has pretty okay ganks with if he could fish for like an E on somebody. He has a slow. He has every one of his abilities is basically wave clear except for W, which he could just use on large minions. So he would have a pretty good kit for jungling if this gives him enough damage to be able to kill small minions reliably. I won't know unless like I give it like some testing after like this hits live, but this could make him an okay jungler. Even still, I think he's better suited in like a lane where he can kind of abuse his like slight range advantage over like melees more, and so that when they have to come into his shotgun legs to trade with him, but could make him viable. We'll see. Alright, this is a lie. Patch 8.9's mana changes hit Victor harder than most mages. Alright, first of all, I don't know why Victor was even in the list of mana changes, because he doesn't build the normal mana items. That aside, Victor was dog shit before the changes and is dog shit after the changes, and basically nothing changed. If anything, his win rate might have gone slightly up as they've slightly nerfed the other mana items that other mages are forced to build. So Not sure I agree with the sentiment, but Victor's been in a terrible spot for a really long time. Riot just has to be careful because Victor is one of those champions that has that very uninteractive wave clear that Riot's trying to avoid giving too much to champions at the moment. So instead, they're putting power into his trading. So 40 damage on his Q. Is that the auto part? The discharge? Is that the auto? I assume that's the auto. I assume the discharge is the auto. So that's 40 damage when he can get the Q auto off. 40 damage is actually pretty substantial considering he's going to max this second. So even by level 9, like you'll feel like 20 extra damage off of this, which will feel pretty alright. And it has a really low cooldown. So this will, you'll feel it, especially coming into mid-game, which Victor's early game is worthless anyway. So coming into mid-game, you'll feel even better. Victor's mid-game doesn't feel terrible as is. The hardest part is getting to that first 1250 gold safely to get your hex core, so that then you can start farming safely. And if you can start farming safely as Victor, then the champion's generally fine as the game progresses. He's a shorter range mage, but the amount of damage and DPS that he can do as a mage is obscenely high. He has very reliable wave clear from long range, but if he wants to do his max DPS, he has to be very close range, and he puts himself in risk to do it. So I think Victor, I've always wanted Victor to be played more again, because I think like the way that he team fights is really punishable, generally speaking. He has a very high if you stand in his E and in multiple ticks of his ultimate, but he also is very punishable because he comes into very short range to be able to get his maximum damage off. So as opposed to something like Azir, like we used to see Victor Azir all the time, as opposed to Azir when we saw Azir fights you from out of your operable range a lot of the time. Victor a lot of times has to get close enough to you to put himself into a very meaningful risk, which is why I like appreciate his play pattern a little bit more and think it's a little bit healthier. So Xin Zhao lost 3 attack damage, 0.3 attack damage growth. And this will help him not translate into a strong mid game. So my man here in mid game, when he's like level 8, is gonna have 2 less attack damage. And this slow is still a slow that's going to make it so he can't miss the rest of his kit, and you're still going to have to flash, otherwise you're going to take like his full Q, and if you get knocked up, you're probably just going to die. These changes do basically nothing. These are worse than the Graves changes. What are the Graves changes? Alright, these do little, right? These do very little. These do nothing. Sick. Zyra, she gains a 1/4 of a second root duration at all ranks. So, I think Zyra maxes E second still, if I'm correct, if nothing's changed in a long time. So, honestly, even a 1/4 second for Zyra, because she has very high sustained damage with her plants, will be very welcome. Later in the game, this could mean a lot of damage, but early in the game, it's like an extra auto that your AD carry might be able to get off. It's some extra autos that your plants can get off, and any kind of root duration for Zyra is extremely valuable. So, and it's good that they didn't just like front load it all, because if they front load it all, then it really encourages Zyra not to max her E, and so then she can focus on getting damage through other sources, and then she becomes less interactive to play against because she has such a large root that's so punishing so early. So fine changes. I don't know what kind of state she was in. She's normally pretty okay in solo queue, if not good in solo queue, because she's very punishing in lane, and lane tries to translate harder in solo queue than it does in other, like in competitive play. Alright, so the basic idea of all these changes, there's a whole bunch of AD carry stuff here. Every AD carry is basically losing 4 attack damage, losing 5 armor, and then gaining health and health growth. So, let me break down what exactly this is going to mean over the course of a game. Alright. So what this means is that AD carries early game will do 4 less. Supports will not do 4 less, and supports are not going to lose their armor like AD carries do. So that means that supports are going to be a little bit relatively stronger very early, levels 1 through 5 in particular, than AD carries are. They will have a little bit more individual onus in the lane. Supports are already very strong in lane, so they're going to have more of that agency still. Base attack damage growth is up. This means that when you hit level 6, you will have the same attack damage you had as before, and then by the time you're 18, you will have more attack damage than you did before. You will have as much as 7 more attack damage than you had before. So later in the game, you're getting an extra like 250 gold worth of attack damage for free, and you're getting an extra 100 to 150, depending on the champion, health for free. And that outweighs the 5 armor. So later in the game, AD carries are gaining health, so they're gaining effective HP. Later in the game, AD carries are gaining up to 7 attack damage. This also doesn't really affect AD carry versus AD carry trades, because if you look at the damage versus armor, and I calced it out in a spreadsheet that I have, and the damage difference that you will do from this to this is less than 1. It is less than 1 damage difference. So AD carries interacting with AD carries will do basically the same exact damage they did before. The big thing is that support autos will do significantly more, and that AD carries will scale better throughout the game. 0.4 health regen, I don't know how substantial this is. I don't know if this is per second or per 5 seconds. It could be meaningful. It looks like they're removing like a third of like the health regen that like AD carries get, so that could be potent, but just you will gain 100 EHP minimum as the game progresses. You lose a little bit early. Supports will be a little bit more powerful to compensate, because obviously if the AD carry has less armor and less attack damage, then the support will be more relatively powerful. And then you can gain up to 7 attack damage later in the game, just baseline. Just leveling, going through the game, you're just going to gain 7 more attack damage, 100 more health, but you're going to lose 5 armor early. That's what all these changes are. Every AD carry is the same. So here they are taking away 2 damage from Master Yi, but they're giving him back attack speed. This is because these champions loved the attack speed on Machete, but they lost it, so they gave it to Yi and Nocturne. The 2 AD is probably more than balanced out by the 8% attack speed, especially because these guys have on-hit passives that they need to trigger by autoing, so both of them will probably like this change. It's probably a very slight buff. Diana, I don't know who actually tries to Diana jungle because it doesn't have any pressure early. I've always hated Diana jungle, but she's getting a slight attack speed buff earlier too. Godspeed. Alright, then we're on to new items. And then there's a lot of talking here because crit items have changed. So, new thing, Storm Razor. 3,200 gold, 70 attack damage, 30 attack speed. So, baseline, this seems alright gold efficient. And if you haven't attacked in the last 3 seconds, you in your next basic attack will critical strike for 160% damage and give you movement speed. And this can go up to 200% damage like a regular crit. So, this item, their thing that they say for it is that if a champion is kiting, then they will get extra use out of this, or if they get locked out of their autos like Jhin. I don't know how aggressively this cooldown scales down with attack speed. If it scales down very aggressively, then I could actually see it being potentially an AD carry item, where they stack a lot of attack speed and then they get this for like burst when they come out on somebody, like think of like Quinn or something like that. Who else? Twitch potentially could abuse this coming out of stealth. But we'll end up seeing like how aggressively it scales. The thing I'm concerned about with this item is that most AD carries are still going to either be building like their Guinsus and building their on-hit scaling with Hurricane and other on-hit steroids. They could potentially build Wit's End. They could potentially go Nashor's Tooth if they have AP scalings. Whereas things like Infinity Edge and these other crit items, if you're an auto attack based AD carry that can't just scale on hit, doesn't have special synergy with it, you're still just going to end up building the same crit items you were before, but they are going to be slightly worse. So, and if you're building crit, you're making Storm's Edge in theory less effective. Like, yes, it scales up with your critical strike chance a little bit, but it's going to be less effective in the sense that you're wasting the crit that it's going to give you on the first autos because it's an auto that you could have crit in the first place. So, Storm Razor is not going to be a great champion, a great item on most of the champions that are going to be building raw crit, unless it's just broken, overtuned, or these items are too bad for people to want to build them. So, I could see this being built more on like assassin style champions than honestly AD carries, and this logic I think is really silly, where whether they're kiting, if you're kiting and you haven't attacked in 3 seconds, you're not kiting, you're running for your life. So if you actually can't stop to like kite and to attack in between your auto attacks, then I guess Storm Razor can eventually give you the burst for it, but ultimately you're losing damage from not working in little bits of auto attack damage anyway. So in most cases, whether you're kiting, you're not going to be taking advantage of this passive. So this is kind of a moot point. But if you're coming out for like burst or something like that, like your Twitch, or if Jhin can actually lock himself out long enough that he can get the crit reliably, then it could be really good on him. There could be like abuse cases. I could see this being built on champions like Zed or somebody that wants to split push in a side lane, because attack speed is nice for them to be able to hit turrets. They don't normally get a lot of attack speed, so it's a good multiplier for them. They don't stack it, so any attack speed they do get is extremely valuable. And then the crit means that he can ult you, auto you, and then if he has Duskblade plus Stormrazor, he's going to auto you, which is going to crit. He's going to auto you, which is going to proc Duskblade. And honestly, he probably doesn't need to land a Shuriken or an E at that point. All that's going to get multiplied up by his ultimate, and Stormrazor might just be able to one-shot you with like an auto attack. What's up, Photon? So I see this as more of like an assassin item. I have been over the Talia changes. I'll go back over it when I'm through the base thing. And then it does like a regular 80 carry item. And I don't know how aggressively this scales with attack speed. If it scales pretty aggressively, then there is potential that like other champions could use it, like Jhin or like any champion that can weave in and out of a fight pretty readily. Long range maybe. But not inspired by like how this would work on a lot of champions. Yeah, Gangplank can get use out of this. That is true. Especially if like it makes it so like he can reliably crit with barrels through it. So if he can reliably crit with barrels, just force it through Stormrazor, then that gives him a much more efficient build path. He can build a lot more greedy. He can build potentially pen or just pure AD or something of that sort. So these could really enable something like Gangplank. I don't think this will be built on 80 carries like they're trying to focus. I think if it is built on 80 carries, it could be built on like Quinn or Twitch or something, but it's more likely going to be built on like assassins or champions that can abuse like this one crit that they're going to get, that have some kind of special scaling with it. Infinity Edge. Alright, so Infinity Edge costs more, and now it, instead of giving you multi, it gives you double crit chance, and 15% of your crit damage is converted to true damage. So I did the math for this a bunch of times in a spreadsheet, and the basic idea is that at a couple of items, you're going to do about the same damage. At 2 items, you're going to do very similar damage. Very similar damage, you're going to lose a tiny bit. You're going to lose a tiny bit. The theoretical maximum damage you can do if you get 3-4 crit items is lower, because now you're capped out at getting 2 crit items, which is literally just instantly caps your crit. Whereas before, you could get, so now your crit chance is effectively capped at 100, but before you could get 100 and then multiply it by 50% with the crit damage. So before, if you had 100% crit chance, you could basically get 150 worth of crit chance because of the extra multi on Infinity Edge. So instead of that, you can only ever get to 100. So you're losing out on a multiplier that you used to get before, and you're converting some of your damage to true damage. I also ran numbers for like how this looks like compared to like versus like tanks and like versus squishy champions. It's not that big of a difference in the damage it gives you versus tanks and squishy champions. Ultimately, I think the average is you're going to lose about 8% damage in mid game if you're going like the conventional like crit build as like an 80 carry. On 2 items, it's less than that. On 3 items, it's about 8%. If you go into 4 crit items, you lose more than that, because 4 crit items before was really greedy, but if you went to 4 crit items before, that was like the highest possible DPS you could do, because you'd have a 100% crit chance, and then you'd turn that into 150 with multi effectively, and so you would do an obscene amount of damage because you basically got a 150% multiplier on everything. Whereas now you're going to get 100%, and then 15% of it turns into true damage. It's not 15% of crit damage is added as true damage, it's 15% is converted, so we're losing more damage later in the game, less damage early. It's not a substantial amount on 2 items. On 3 items, you're losing on average around 8%. So a little bit here, and it costs a little bit more. So you're losing 8% damage, and it costs a little bit more. Granted, you get 10 AD. That'll probably offset the damage loss slightly, but the gold cost, I mean, it's basically gold efficient, like what you're trading here. So that's what you can expect. You're going to lose a little bit of damage mid-game. A little bit. Essence Reaver. Alright, so Essence Reaver, I am 100% sure, is going to have some really silly abuse cases. Because you get an 8-second buff where you get attack speed, and your basic attacks refund 20% of non-ultimate cooldowns. So, what this means is if you are any champion that has, lethal tempo, or you have the new domination keystone, and you can open up with your ultimate reliably as the champion, think like Twitch. Twitch can reliably get off multiple expunges, right? Lucian also is one that comes to mind because he's going to be able to dash so frequently and constantly be weaving spells into you. He can dash into you, auto Q, auto E, auto Q, auto E, and he can do that the instant he gets this item, and he starts off with an ult. He can even tap the ult, cancel it, and then auto E, auto Q, auto E, auto Q, and just do that till you die for 8 seconds, and he's just going to be able to weave so much into it. Riven is another one where if she can spam all of her spells, then she has a crazy amount of disruption. She becomes a lot tankier because she has like her shield that she can trigger more reliably. The something else that comes to mind is Fiora. Could be an abuse case for this. She can run out of mana, and this means that after she ultimates, she's going to be able to Q that much more. And her being able to Q that much more, or being able to W that much more, is just going to increase her damage a ton. She can also auto reset with her E, which will trigger it more reliably, so she can fly around. Her Q will trigger it too, because they're considered basic attacks. So things that came to mind immediately: Xayah, Lucian. I didn't think of Riven. Good call. And Fiora were things that came to mind immediately for me. Because Xayah also, if she can constantly have feathers out, most of her damage is in her E, and if she can basically chain root somebody at that point, if she has like some attack speed for it, it's 20% remaining cooldown. 20% remaining. But still, that means if you get like 2 autos off early and Fiora has like a 5-second cooldown on her Q, it probably won't even be 5 seconds. Later in the game, it's like a 3-second cooldown. She has like a 3-second cooldown. You reduce that twice, and then it's already ticking down. Then it can basically be like a 1 to 1.5 second cooldown. So you can basically double halve the cooldown of like some of your spells if they're like a spell that you're using reliably. It will reduce to 2 seconds if you hit. Remaining cooldowns. So not as crazy as it could be, but I still think it could be like extremely strong on somebody like her, especially because like that makes her ultimate like so much easier to trigger all of the marks for, because she'll be able to have that much more mobility. So this is probably going to have abuse cases, and some AD carries in general might just really like using it, but I don't know what else. Like, I don't know like if many AD carries will be using it. It looks like more bruisers might actually be interested in using it at the end of the day. If this ends up being a strong item, then I could even see things like Renekton ultimates, and then he dives you. Like, even though he doesn't give a shit about missing mana refund, like, he just ults, and he starts diving you, and he gets off so many more spells that his damage is that much higher. So I don't want this to be an item that is strong enough that if a champion has the ability to just, like, outright dive you or pick a fight whenever they want, then they can kind of just bully you over with it. So that's something I would be a little bit worried about with Essence Reaver, in the same sense that I didn't want, Spellbinder's Orb to be too strong, because I don't want it to be to the point where if one person builds Spellbinder's Orb, then they can just pick the fight on you for free and they just always win, because they just out-stat check you because the item is so efficient on one item. So we'll see how this turns out. It could be really interesting to try on a lot of champions. I really like unique item interactions like this, so this will be pretty cool to play around with on a lot of things. So actually kind of excited about this. Alright, Last Whisper. So this is in most cases going to be a nerf, because 35% bonus before you could build the little mini piece of it, and that's all you really needed to be able to deal with tanks and the like. Whereas now you're going to get 10% total armor, so it'll be a little bit better against like squishies. Like, you might reduce like up to 10 of their armor, but against tanks, you might have previously reduced, like, if they had 200 armor, like 120 of that is bonus, then you could reduce 40% of that 120, so you could reduce 48, whereas now you're going to reduce like 20, right? So in the case that you built Last Whisper before, it's just strictly worse, and it's not that great against squishies. In this iteration, when you get this, it's like a fine item against squishies, but this one is pretty uninspiring for the price. So in the same vein, Lord Dominic's Regard is now 35% total armor pen, and you lose 10 attack damage. You lose the more damage to tanks here, but 35% total armor pen. So I think this is where all the damage is going to get made up, right? So AD carries are losing like 8%-ish damage on like mid-game spikes that they would have had before, and it's a little more expensive. In exchange, when they get this item, this will reduce the armor of like a squishy, which used to reduce it by 0, will now reduce the armor of a squishy by like 30 to 50 potentially. Somebody that hasn't invested a lot in armor, and being able to reduce that much armor off of a squishy champion is incredibly valuable. This will go back to being a mainstay that people build every game, and you're not going to like situationally be building it. You're going to be building this every game because it's going to be really good into squishies. It's going to be really good into tanks, and it still has OKAD on it. It's basically just old Last Whisper all over again. So we're just going to build this a lot. And this is where we're going to make up a lot of the damage that we lost, especially on squishy targets. In theory, we might do a little bit less damage against tanks than we used to, because the multi on IE was a little bit better damage even against tanks than the true damage currently is, and then we lose this 20% multiplier. And the 35% bonus armor pen, like, we're still going to get like an extra 35 pen against like a tank, but the 20% more multiplier here would have been more valuable. So this is still a buff against tanks baseline, this part is, but you might lose a little bit against like really healthy tanks. But this is going to become a baseline item again that every AD carry should be building. So, no way around it. It's like Void Staff. We're going to have to be building it. Void Staff finally got nerfed enough that we're not going to be building a lot, but I think this is just we're going to be on this. It has a bad build path too, since Last Whisper isn't remarkable, so that feels kind of bad. Mortal Reminder is the same vein. It has less armor pen on it, and in exchange it has the reduced healing. So this is still going to be the thing you're going to take into like Mundo and whatnot. It feels a little bad that it has a little bit less armor on it, but they had to differentiate them somehow if they're going to give you something meaningful to build Executioners out of. So this is what that is. This will also see a lot of use. These two items, very good. Very good. Big changes. We're going to have to adjust AD carry build paths to include these like in our first 4 items. Currently, AD carries don't build these a lot of times to like 5th, 6th item, and it depends on like whether the enemy composition, that if you'd build it at all. Now you're going to have to be building these in every build as a multiplier. You just have to. Alright, so Brawler's Glove cost is up. I assume this is because you could buy like Shiv, Infinity Edge, and then buy a few Brawler's Gloves and you'd be capped. And you could just have like a couple of Brawler's Gloves and be like, hey, yeah, I've got my full multiplier and I didn't have to spend very much for it. And that'd probably be a little bit of an abuse case for like what you could do with Infinity Edge. So instead, they're increasing the gold cost. They're removing Cloak of Agility. This will spike a little later, and it's a little bit weaker, so this is interesting. This means that when you're building towards your second crit item, like your second attack speed crit item, you're going to be a little bit less powerful along the way. And these are more expensive on the whole. So 80 carries will spike to their same damage that they do now around 600 gold later. So that means that they're going to need another like 3 waves potentially. So like on average, 80 carries are going to need at least another minute to be able to hit the same breakpoints they were before. And then at like 3 items, they're going to need like an extra minute, minute and a half. And then they're still going to do like 8% less damage than they did before. Once they get like these Last Whisper items, I think they can still do potentially more damage to squishy targets than they were doing previously. But before then, they're going to be a little bit weaker. A little bit. In exchange, Last Whisper is better, and Bloodthirster, Bork are cheaper. Bork is the highest DPS item in the game for basically every AD carry that auto attacks. So I would love to see more people build this when they want to make up damage. So if you're losing damage in other parts of your build, like if you're losing damage and efficiency through like your crit items, then Bork should become a more valuable option as a DPS item, and even potentially as like a rush item. If you want to be able to pressure when somebody is like rushing toward like a crit item, you can punish them during that window that they still have to scale. So Maw Elf Malmortius. Magic resist increased, base shield value increased, shield no longer scales opponent's magic resist. So gain 5 MR and then the shield. Alright, so this shield is basically worse at all levels. Because this already gave you 45 MR. So basically if you had anything else that gave MR, or any runes or anything like that, you would get more shielding than you do now. So this shield is basically just nerfed in every case, but you gain 5 MR, which is probably a net buff, but this is weird, because Maw's not a terribly popular item anyway, so I don't know what's up with that. Small change, a little bit of MR, cool. Alright, Guardian Angel. We wanted to allow marksmen to face heavy physical damage to get a chain vest. Alright, so I like it when you can build like a more intermediate item on the way to building something big, because it feels really bad having to build like a cloth armor to get started this. This costing more, I mean, you're paying more. You're paying 400 gold more for 10 more armor, so you're definitely getting robbed a little bit compared to what it is right now. But Guardian Angel will still see plenty of purchases like a 6th item, 5th item. But if 80 carries feel the need to multiply their damage, then they're going to be building stuff like Bork. They're going to be building stuff like Last Whisper, potentially earlier than they were before, so that could delay Guardian Angel even further. Or even with this price point, people might just build it a lot less. It also depends on what's really threatening to 80 carries on the patch. Because if they have things that are threatening and can just stand on your body and kill you when you stand back up, then who cares about Guardian Angel? Or if they have all magic damage, then the effect of Guardian Angel can be good if some people can protect you, but is it worth 2,800 gold? Who knows? Alright, Banner of Command. Enhanced minions are highly resistant to magic and physical damage. So instead of being immune to magic, they now take 70% less from everything. So I like this change because Banner basically invalidated a lot of magic damage comps, and it made it really hard to go like dual mage or things like that, because if the enemy had multiple tanks, they could just buy multiple banners, and it became extremely difficult for you to be able to compensate for how much like pressure those minions would put out. So definitely a positive change to allow diversity throughout roles, and to encourage like people to try things that like you don't have to have like the abundance of like your damage be like physical damage now, because of the threat of multiple banners of command or something, which you would see in like high level play. Sometimes people would build as many as like 2 banners in like a team. If the enemy team is dual AP, well, suddenly it's a lot harder for them to keep like map pressure. None of these other things really matter. They're bigger on the mini map, or you can see combat numbers. Like, cool. Alright, Shirley's Reverie has emerged as 2 reliable rush item. I thought Shirley's was nuts when they changed it. Singed and Vladimir are among them. They're shifting the stat profile to make it more attractive for supportive champions. So it's 150 gold more. It's 50% longer cooldown. It's gaining mana regen and losing movement speed. So across the board, this thing is just basically worse for the champions that were building it, because the champions that were building it didn't really care about the mana regen, and they lost the movement speed. We need more good support items. Hell yeah, dude. Support items are so good. Ugh. So this is just a little worse overall. I still think Vladimir will build this 100% of the time. I don't see a situation where he wouldn't. I think this still outweighs his other options, because even if it's a 90-second cooldown, that's a 90-second window where he can close the gap on somebody really reliably, and if he can get close to somebody, he normally has the damage to just outright kill a squishy, and it really enables his play pattern later in the game, where he needs to get deep into a fight to ensure that he can get as much healing as possible and get off as much damage and be as much of a threat as possible. So Runic Echoes is building on a Fiendish Codex instead of Lost Chapter, which more small pieces is generally good in the jungle because you can't really control when you're going to recall. And then 20 AP. So this is a good buff because jungle AP junglers are struggling. That's partially because AP jungle itemization is weird because it's hard to build after the first item, and so the first item should honestly probably be overtuned to compensate, because building AP items as a jungler generally has felt kind of bad. People used to always build like Roa, but Roa is still slow scaling. Rylai's got nerfed a lot, so it's not as reliable, and not every champion wants to build Rylai's. Building things like Lichbane only works on certain champions. It already takes up the Luden slot, so it's not like you're going to build like one of the mana CDR items, or you'd be stacking it late even if you did build like a tier. So a lot of times junglers just end up in a weird situation where they don't really know what they can build after a first item for AP. There's not really very efficient things. So, and yeah, I agree with you, Photon. Support items are kind of silly, because we get to a point where like tanks are building Locket, junglers are building Zeeks, supports and sometimes mid laners are building Athenes, supports are also building Ardent, the tanks are building Banner, the supports are building the jungle tanks are building Knight's Vow, and the items are so overtuned as support items that people have to buy them for every champion on the map just to get as many of the effects as possible, because they're overtuned. And so even champions that want to be building selfishly end up having to build kind of supportively just because the items are overtuned, which feels kind of bad because you don't want necessarily to give up some of your agency, but it is the most efficient thing for you to be doing. So, Fleet Footwork, now the movement speed is less, no longer gives additional healing from critical strikes. So what this tells me is that this is the biggest nerf of like the changes, because crit scales this up so much. Crit scales this up so much. So that means that coupled with the changes above, the crit changes above, we'll see more of champions like Varus building like Gwynsu's Nashers, or Gwynsu's Boric Hurricane, those kinds of things. We'll see more Kaisa building Gwynsu's and those kinds of things. We'll see more of Kog'Maw building Gwynsu's and those kinds of things. We're going to see a lot more of champions that really want to be able to take advantage of the fact that they're not going to lose as much as crit champions are here, and that aren't going to be as affected by the item changes up here. Ultimately, if you're building those items, like the only thing that's changing is Runon's Hurricane is 300 gold more, but Bork is 200 gold less. So if you're building Gwynsu's Hurricane Bork, it costs you only 100 more gold than before, whereas the crit itemization is costing you 600 more gold than before, right? So, I mean, it's a lot less of a blow to you than it is to them. I'm also interested in this Hail of Blades, because Hail of Blades gives you attack speed for the first 3 attacks. If more than 1.5 seconds between attacks, then it will fade. So this is for marksmen, it says, but a lot of Kled goes past the attack speed cap. So I wonder if this would actually be good on Kled to be able to enable him that much faster of like a W trigger. And if he can get that fast of a W trigger, it might be really hard to trade into him, especially if he ever gets like a tug. So hard to say if like this would like work with something like him, but it says it exceeds the cap. I don't know how Kled's W works exactly. I don't know if it puts him to the cap or just gives him the crazy amount or something, but this could be good for something like him. And if you only have to be out of combat for 5 seconds, I assume this is out of all combat, not out of combat with enemy champions. Because if it was just out of combat with enemy champions, then this would be really nuts in bot lane, because you can kind of just force a trade whenever. Let's say you're Kog'Maw, and you turn on your W, and then you get your quick 3 autos, and then you go back to farming, and the next time your W's up, you can just do the same thing. And it'd be really hard to contest against those autos. Shaco with it, where he comes out of stealth, and he can get a lot of damage too when he comes out behind you and gets the more multiplier. Potentially. I can see this being used by high range champions, and I wonder if champions like Quinn, if champions like, I wonder if like Twitch could use something like this, but I feel like press the attack is normally better, right? Because press the attack multiplies your damage, it multiplies allies' damage, it does a burst of damage itself. So I feel like a lot of the times, like, press the attack is better, especially early. And if you wanted this kind of threat, then a lot of the power would come from early. So I feel like this kind of shares space with, like, press the attack, where you come out and you immediately want to be doing damage through, like, your auto attacks. But this could be used by some bruisers, too. Like, I'm sure, like, not Aurelia kind of loves Conqueror, doesn't she? I mean, Conqueror is really good. Who would use this? Unless it's just blatantly overtuned. But it's 5 seconds out of combat, so you're not gonna be able to trigger it like reliably, right? So like, you trigger it once, and then you're farming minions in bot lane, and you're not gonna be able to do too much. Yes, Kindred. All right, there you go. Great, because Kindred's gonna be out of combat, going in between places, and she can come out of the jungle, use her E on somebody, and reliably trigger her E for the burst damage to set up her gank. Yeah, there you go. Hell yeah, dude. You're right. Who else? I'm trying to think. Let me look at like a list of champions or something. Let me look at a list of champions. Like I wanna think of like what could be an abuse case. Diana? I feel like Diana would still rather have something else, right? I mean, split push Diana maybe, where she builds like Nashor's, Lichbane, that kind of shit. Maybe. You know, has anybody experimented with like Gwynsu's, Nashor's, and fucking Diana? Let me look through champions. Just for your first few autos. Could this be good on Jhin? Because 100% attack speed would give him a massive multiplier for his attack damage, right? And if they're removing the synergy with this with crit, would the multiplier that this gives him for attack damage actually just be really strong? Maybe. AS does multiply his attack damage, yes. AS and crit both do. Let me go to Jhin. Let me see what the multiplier is. Because it's 50% early, right? Yeah, 50%. So 50% would give him 12.5% additional attack damage. Later in the game, he'd get 25%. So maybe this could be something on Jhin where his first 3 autos get ramped up in damage, and then the 4th one is obviously the 4th shot, and that one's going to do tons of damage regardless. So it could give Jhin like a case where like he can actually just kill somebody. Yi, potentially. Yeah, that's true. Nocturne, those kinds of champions that like come out and they want to do like a couple of quick autos and they can reset themselves doing it. Honestly, maybe Rek'Sai. Because I always want to go. Yeah, I was gonna say there you go, Rek'Sai. Because you can get your Fury before they even land now. Because otherwise you can't get your Fury to 100 before they land unless you have a Titanic Hydra for the extra auto reset. So maybe with Hail of Blades you can get enough autos off and you can take advantage of the additional damage it gives you. Then you can get your E in before they can even have any opportunity to have any counterplay. So potentially. Xin Zhao would love it. Yeah, that's true. So it seems more like junglers in this case are going to be the ones that are interested in taking it. Right? From what we're looking at. Maybe Vi, she Qs into somebody and she can get her burst off. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be like an 80 carry thing. I think this is going to be more of like a bruiser, skirmishy kind of thing where a champion wants to get a couple of quick autos off for like some part of their kit, and this is going to enable them to do that. Alright, we'll go past it. We'll feel it out on the patch. Ultimate Hunter. We've been looking into changing Ultimate Hat for a while. So Ultimate Hat is removed, and they put Ultimate Hunter here. So Ultimate Hunter gives you 5% Ultimate CDR, and then you get an additional 2% per Bounty Hunter stack. So this gives you up to 15% Ultimate CD on top of any other CD that you have. I think Ultimate Hat gave a really similar percent, but you had to be spamming your Ultimate to get it. So now you can get that CDR even before you're fighting champions. So if you're like a jungler that's really dependent on your Ultimate, then this could be something that you would want, because now you're going to have windows where you could get kills early and it will take 15% off your Ultimate for the rest of the game if you can get kills in like each lane. So this could be really potent for junglers that want that kind of CDR. Also, if like a mid laner goes and they need like their Ultimate for like kill threat or something like that, then they can potentially take this instead of like maybe the sustain. Alright, Nimbus Cloak. Shortly after casting an Ultimate, gain 100 movement speed. Unlike other runes, Nimbus Cloak's cooldown is affected by cooldown reduction, 60 seconds, so it can go down to 36. So you can run through units and you gain 100 movement speed. I mean, I guess it's a minor rune, right? So it's not that bad. I guess it's just going in the spot that Ultimate Hat was. I mean, 100 movement speed when you ult for certain champions is going to be really impactful, right? Because like, let's say you're playing Lucian, right, with the and you wanted to pick a fight with your Essence Reaver, or yeah, Kennen, hell yeah, and you pop your Ultimate and then you get 100 movement speed, and that helps you gun them down, and then you can get in range to abuse your Essence Reaver. So for champions that already like have so much of their power around their Ultimate, or that their power can be enabled through their Ultimate with the Essence Reaver, or whatever the Ultimate might do, like some Ultimates like buff or something like that, like this could be very potent. I mean, Singed might take this. Isn't that gross with Skarner? Yeah, Skarner would take it. And this is in... The only issue is like this is in the same tier that like Celerity and Water Walking is, so Skarner takes Predator, and then he also normally wants Celerity and Water Walking, so he is going to like this. But in the same vein, it's not going to be like as crazy as it could be. He already slows himself a little bit, because like most of his movement speed is toward people. But it will help him a little. And Skarner's already one of the better picks in the game, so hell yeah. Mini Dematerializer, it's offering too much wave control too early. I don't even see it that much, really. I mean, okay. 4 minutes. I think they're slowly trying to nerf like a lot of the champions that kind of get like priority for free, and they're doing it like one champion at a time. So like the focus of this one was like Talia, but this will also be good with, where is it? This is really good with Olaf, right? Because then you can't get blocked or anything like that. You can just run straight through units and you can just headbutt somebody. So very good on Olaf, good on Skarner. Probably good on Trundle, honestly. You could ult somebody, and then if they're not like a mobile champion, you can just run at them and start clubbing them. So a lot of the current junglers wouldn't mind this. I honestly might end up taking it a lot of the current junglers. Even for something like Kha'Zix, where like you R and you're coming into somebody from stealth, like you could R, get the 100 movement speed, and close the gap on them that much easier. This will be really competitive with Celerity and Water Walking for junglers that already go that route. So Inhibitor turrets and Nexus turrets are losing health. Nexus turrets are losing a lot of health, but they're gaining health regen. So I guess if you can't come back to that turret for a really long time, then it will regen. Health is now divided into thirds. I can only regen to the top of the current third. Alright, so this just seems like it's going to be easier to break down like a base, like for mistakes, because honestly I don't think the regen is that impactful. Normally you're pushing down these turrets when you have Baron or something like that anyway, and when you have Baron, like, normally you just outright take like a large portion of their base without really them being able to do anything about it, so. Turret gold. Similar to bounty changes last patch, we're looking to decrease the number of truly global objectives. Inner turret, instead of 175 to all nearby champions, does 300 gold to nearby champions, and they're taking that 125 gold from everybody else, so from the global part of it. So this will help a little with what they're trying to do of give like individual gold around and being able to like target where you want to put gold on, but I don't think it does as much as it might sound like at a glance, because ultimately if you think about how games normally go, when you take inner turrets, the only things that take inner turrets are split pushers and entire teams that group like mid game generally, right? So if a split pusher takes it, yes, the split pusher will get a little bit more gold to enable themselves. So that is a case where this will enable that champion to do its job better. If it's a split pusher, it's looking to split push and wants more gold to be able to selfishly split push, then this is good. In every other scenario, this is normally just going to be the same gold as it was before, split amongst the most people, because normally there's not just one person in a lane. Either like a jungler goes to like a side lane to make sure the turret gets pushed over, or you guys rotated first to something, or you had a Rift Herald, or you had a Baron and you started taking inner turrets, whatever it might be. Alright, Baron now has less attack speed, half the base damage, and loses 33% of its corruption damage, and its special attacks no longer apply corruption stacks. So basically they reverted almost all the damage that they gave the thing previously. Which is weird, because I don't feel like Baron has actually been that hard on this patch either. I don't know. I actually don't feel like Baron was that much harder to take on this patch than it was previously. I feel like I've taken Baron in all the same situations as before and didn't really feel any different. So, I don't really know how I feel about this. I guess maybe if you're a bunch of squishy champions, it was really shitting on people, but normally games have a few tanks in it, so. Alright, so the action around Scuttle Crab is making for a good mini objective. It's currently up too often, forcing too much of a jungler's attention onto its continuous respawn. So they're making it respawn slower, and the shrine duration is increased to compensate. So you still want to contest them. They're not going to be up as frequently, so you have more time to do other shit. Scuttle Crabs are worth basically as much as a regular camp, but then they also give you a 1.5 ward. So Scuttles are basically just like super jungle camps at the moment, because they give the same EXP, a little bit more gold, and then they give you the free ward plus movement speed, so you can always be the one that's first on that side of the map. Just trying to reduce the amount of conflict that's happening over the crab in the middle of the river. So, and then bumping a little bit of experience back into the jungle. So the EXP is the same early, because I'm sure they still don't want to make junglers go back to hitting level 3 at the point that they were before, with like basically no thought going into it. You can still hit 3 like the same timings as before. That hasn't really changed, but this means that you have to like tailor your path to it, or you have to do like an extra camp, basically. So these level up as you level up in the game. So after the first few levels, I'm sure like is where most of this extra EXP comes in, because I think junglers are falling a little bit more behind pacing than they were before. Especially some of the slower clearing junglers that can't keep up with Razorbeaks or with Krugs, because Krugs give a disproportionate amount of EXP compared to other camps at the moment. So, and that's it, right? Instant feedback, level up rewards, 2 Sygh skins. Alright, so then the quick recap will be Anivia, slight buff to her early wave clear and her safety, slight damage buff. Probably didn't need it, she's probably in a fine spot, but they said it's because the mana changes hit her too hard, but she was probably overtuned before anyway, because she had a ridiculously high win rate for a long time. These Graves changes do very little. They're not enough to hurt like how reliable he is at what he does and how hard he is to contest. These Kha'zix changes will mean that we're not going to evolve R anymore, and probably that Kha'zix won't be seen very much in competitive play, and it's probably just going to be pretty shitty. He's not going to have nearly the map control that he does now, and he can't gank lanes as reliably as he can now. The change I would like to see instead would be to turn his invisibility into stealth, so that you can track him with pink wards, and you could see him potentially with like oracles rather than remove it altogether, because I think being able to opt into map control with Kha'zix and being able to like actually act like a predator on the map, which is supposed to be like his thematic fantasy, is like really cool. But instead we're just going to be like evolving Q probably, and we're just going to like run at people, and if they're isolated then we'll stat check them and kill them, and if they're not isolated then the champion fucking sucks. So that's probably what's going to happen. This will encourage people to evolve Q and invade more, because if you when you invade, jungle monsters don't count as not being isolated. So you can be isolated while doing jungle monsters. So Kha'Zix will come out of the bush and Q you, and then a second later, half later, he'll Q you again. And if you don't get away in that amount of time, you're probably just outright dead. So that's going to be his new playstyle. He's going to try to hunt people in the jungle. But if people ever aren't isolated, then that's scary, and it's going to be a lot easier to track him. So he might have a harder time getting into the jungle or getting involved in lanes that are struggling. Alright, so slight kindred buff, she'll be able to fight over marks more often. Don't know if that fixes her problem. Not sure what these lead changes are exactly. I don't know if they are that he's going to save like a second or two off of every spell cast, because it says cooldown reduction now also applies for the duration of the reactivation time. But I don't know if like the cooldown was still ticking down before and the cooldown reduction wasn't applying, or if the cooldown wasn't ticking down before at all. So if the cooldown wasn't ticking down before at all and now it does, then these are huge buffs to Lee Sin and he's going to be fucking broken. But if it was ticking down before and this is just like it's just a change so that his cooldown reduction works when it wasn't working before, then this doesn't really change much early and it changes stuff a little bit later, and it's still like a small buff. But depending on what this actually means, this could be a massive buff. If not, it's just a decent buff. These are nice too. Rakan got 20 shield off of his early shield, because this is 40 from 50 and he can use it twice, so he loses 20 shield early. That's pretty potent. Loses some healing, coupled with the health regen that 80 carries are losing, actually be pretty notable. Talia is going to have a harder time getting herself out of lane because her Q isn't AoE, because her E now does less base damage. This is the weird part. I don't know why her E does less damage. Like, okay. She's gonna be in lane for longer, so she's gonna have more vulnerable periods. They compensated that by giving her more ability to move without her ultimate, which they also nerfed the utility on, and by giving her the little bit of health, like the safety back that she used to have, and some movement speed. She also can't cast a Q and then run at somebody while on her worked ground to take advantage of it anymore. So overall, Talia will be quite a bit worse, realistically. She's not going to be the same Talia that she was before, is like the biggest problem. So they're nerfing her in a way that hurts her identity of a champion that's able to push, and then she's not good at fighting people, so instead of fighting people, she moves around the map. So that's really potent in competitive play because she's really macro oriented, but she's always kind of struggled a little bit in solo queue, aside from when she was just kind of blatantly overtuned. So these changes, I think, are just kind of like overshooting like where they want to put her, and they kind of hurt her core identity, which is the part that I don't like. I don't know if these changes make Uriel able to jungle. He has a decent kit for jungle if he ever gets the damage to do it, so if he can jungle, then Godspeed. I still think he'll be a better top laner, punishing people that have to come into his shotgun range and using his slight range advantage. But if these enable him to jungle, then that's cool. Victor, this is meaningful damage for mid-game. He still has the problem where he just spikes really late, and it takes a really long time for him to be able to push his lane and be able to be competitive, so if the Graves changes up here are small and don't hurt him a ton, these Xin changes are non-existent. They might as well have not put this here. I don't know why they say anything about Xins out here. Slight Zyra buff. Base stats, to recap again, you lose 480, 5 armor. You gain 780 by the end of the game. It evens out at level 6. At level 6, you have the same attack damage you used to. At level 18, you have 7 more than you used to for free. You're also gaining 100 to 150 health on every champion. That 100 to 150 health means you'll have more EHP later in the game. You're going to have a little bit less early based on armor, but it's really close. So ultimately, you're going to have about the same for like when you get all in. And you're going to have more health, which means you're going to be a little bit more defensible against magic damage than you are presently. But this means that in 80 carry versus 80 carry interactions, then you do about the same damage, less than 1 different than you used to. The biggest thing is that you're going to do less damage early game. If a jungler comes to gank you, you're going to do less damage against the enemy support, and the enemy support will be able to do more damage to you with their auto attacks, because enemy supports were not nerfed, but AD carries were. So the enemy AD carry will not do any more damage to you. It'll be less than 1 difference, but enemy supports will do meaningfully more damage to you. So supports in bot lane will now have more agency to be able to bully an AD carry early and take over that lane. Small compensation buffs for Machete, they're moving attack damage to AS. Storm Razor looks like a gimmick item for assassins and maybe Gangplank, Quinn, those kinds of champions. Infinity Edge, you lose about 8% damage going into mid game, a little bit more super late because of the potential of building like 4 crit items previously. Not a huge nerf. Essence Reaver looks like it can be abused on certain champions. Fiora comes to mind, Lucian comes to mind, somebody mentioned Riven, Xayah comes to mind for somebody that might like it a lot. Not sure who else off the top of my head, but maybe even see champions like Rakton and whatnot build this because they cast their ultimate and then they just all in people, and they will be able to cast their spells so often that it'd be really potent for them. Especially considering that, like, if basic attacks refund 20% non-ultimate cooldown, like what if you're Rakton and you auto and then empowered W them, and you get that counts as 4 autos because you get the triple auto. So then that could just basically reset your cooldowns, right? So if that's true and that works that way with Renekton, then he'll be able to like basically dive people from full, I think. So that'd be interesting if that works that way with him. Last Whisper's a little worse probably for the cases that you were building it before. I just clicked on it by accident. Fuck, I clicked on one. Lord Dominic's Regard, better overall. This is now a core item for AD carries again. This or Mortal Reminder. Doesn't matter which one. You have to build one of them. You're going to need one of these like you used to. It's just old Last Whisper all over again. You're going to need it. This is where you're getting back some of your damage that you lose from crit if you're a crit champion. These are better items for crit champions than they are for the Guinsoo's Nashers or Guinsoo's Hurricane champions, because those normally scale some of their damage through magic, and if they're scaling some of their damage through magic, then they're not taking full advantage of the armor pen, or even potentially through the attack damage, which they can scale through crit. So these are definitely buffs more toward crit items champions. And then slower spikes on all items. Infinity Edge costs more, all the crit items cost more. Lifesteal items are lower to compensate. Again, this could mean that Guinsoo's Hurricane Brick becomes really strong because ultimately you're only spending 100 more gold than you used to, and you're getting the same power, and some of those champions are already really good, whereas crit items you have to spend 600 plus more gold to be able to get to the same point that you were at before. So Maw of Malmortius, basically unchanged, slight MR buff. Guardian Angel is a better build path, but is less gold efficient. Banner of Command is a little bit less oppressive to AP champions. Shirolia's is less of a selfish item. They want it to be a good support item. There's already 360 fucking good support items in the game, it feels like, that everybody's forced to build, so whatever. Runic Echoes is better. That's a good change. I honestly feel like this should be overtuned because AP junglers have a hard time itemizing, especially after their first item. So since they have that hard time itemizing, their first item should probably be a little bit overtuned to compensate, because they don't really have a good build path out of that normally, because they're behind on CDR because they weren't able to go one of the mana items. They don't want to build it late because then they're slow scaling. They want to take advantage of the fact that they're a jungler. They want to be able to pressure the map early. So if they're pressuring the map, then they need something aggressive, but not everybody scales with something like Lichbane. Not everybody scales with something like Protobelt or wants Protobelt for like the gap closer. So junglers are normally in a weird spot for like AP items after their first one, so the first one should probably be overtuned to compensate. Fleet Footwork is worse across the board basically. Actually it's better, a little bit better for melee that aren't crit, so that's cool. Yasuo might actually enjoy this early. In exchange, like, they took away the crit part of it, so again, this doesn't hurt the champions like Kog'Maw. This doesn't hurt the champions that want Guinsoo's and Nashers, that want Guinsoo's Bork, Hurricane, that want those things as much, so those champions don't mind it. Hail of Blades looks like it will be more of like a jungle item thing for jungle rune for Xin Zhao, Kindred, champions that want to get their quick couple of autos in, and that enables like the champion to do what it wants to do. Maybe Twitch could use this coming out of stealth. Maybe Quinn could use this to get like her damage for like her marks off as fast as possible. Not entirely sure who would love it, but I'm sure there'll be some experimentation with it. It seems like a better iteration than Lethal Tempo because you get more control over it, and it's harder for them to disengage because you would be picking the fight when you want to. And it's going to be most used on champions that can drop out of combat for a while. So like if you're an AD carry, you're spending most of your downtime hitting minions, then you're not going to be out of combat to take advantage of the proc. So definitely seems more tuned toward like junglers. Maybe even something like Tom Kench. If he can get his Q on you, then he can get closer to you and he can get his licks off faster, so he can potentially eat you. That kind of thing could actually be meaningful. Ultimate Hat. This looks like something that you can scale up before. We used to have to scale Ultimate Hat by casting the ult. Now you can scale it up earlier in the game, so that's nice for champions that are ultimate gated. This looks like a direct buff to Olaf, Skarner, maybe Trundle, basically any champion that wants their ultimate to enable their kit. And so those champions will be building this free. Meaning Dematerializer slightly nerfed, turret durability slightly less. Turret goals being changed. This mostly only affects split pushers that can get the inner turrets on their own, and it affects teams. It doesn't affect team at all, because when the team goes to an area, if you're grouped for it, then you're going to get the same exact gold as you would have before. Baron Nashor does less damage. I didn't think it did that much damage before, but I guess like I'm used to having like multiple tanks on a team where it doesn't feel like it's super threatening. I think it does do a little bit more damage, it felt like, but not like crazy amounts, so these seem like big nerfs. Scuttle Crab a little less frequent, and Jungler's a little bit less behind in EXP going into mid game, because they'll get a little bit more EXP after the first couple of camps that they clear. So you, instead of being level 6 when laners are 7, maybe you'll be 6.1 when laners are 7. Maybe when they're level 9 and you're level 8, or you're 7 turning 8, then you'll actually be 8. I don't know. So that's it for patch notes. What should I play?